forbidden. Not because it was dangerous. Not because it was false. But because the ones who discovered it did not want you to know. There is a world that existed long before history books were written. Long before maps were drawn. Long before your name was even a sound in the air. In that world, your ancestors did not just survive. They commanded forces that modern science is only beginning to understand. 7 of those forces were buried, hidden inside oral traditions, locked inside rituals that outsiders called primitive, dismissed as superstition. But what if? What if the ones who called it primitive were simply afraid? Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you will question everything you were taught about power. Long before memory was written, Africa was not a place people came to discover. It was a place people came from. From our soil, the first humans looked up at stars and asked questions that still have no answers. From our rivers, the first healers drew medicines that modern pharmacies now patent under different names. From our silence, the first priests heard voices that came from somewhere beyond sound. This was not myth. This was knowledge. Passed not through paper, but through blood. Not through schools, but through ceremony. Not through language alone, but through something older than language. And at the center of it all were the ancestors. Not as dead figures frozen in memory, but as living forces. Watching, guiding, warning, and sometimes granting powers that no name in any modern tongue can fully describe. 7 powers. 7 truths that were feared by empires, suppressed by missionaries, mocked by colonizers, and nearly erased from the memory of the world. Allegedly, according to oral traditions across West, Central, and Southern Africa, these were not supernatural gifts given to a chosen few. They were disciplines, ancient sciences of the spirit, available to those willing to listen, willing to sacrifice, willing to remember. Some believe these powers still exist, still alive in the blood of those who carry the old names, still whispering to those quiet enough to hear. They called it by many names. The Yoruba called it Oju Inu, the inner eye. The Dogon of Mali spoke of a perception that existed not in the head, but in the chest. According to oral tradition, certain ancestors could see what had not yet happened. Not as dreams, not as visions, but as clear, waking knowledge. They say these seers would walk into a village and know its suffering before a word was spoken. They would place their hand on the earth and feel the movement of events 3 days ahead. Was this gift? Or was this the result of generations of intentional silence? Of minds trained to listen to the word at a frequency modern life has nearly destroyed. Think about that. Long before the first written word, your ancestors were fluent in a language that had no alphabet. Some believe certain lineages across Central Africa maintain what oral traditions describe as a deep communion with the natural world. Not the romantic idea of being close to nature. Something more precise, more demanding. It is alleged that certain spiritual custodians could interpret the behavior of birds as warnings, could read the movement of water as instruction, could understand, through ceremony and ancestral training, what the earth itself was communicating. The Sangoma traditions of Southern Africa speak of this in their initiation rites. The Bwiti practitioners of Gabon claim it still. Was this metaphor? Or was it a real intelligence, a science of observation so refined that it blurred the line between knowing and sensing? What do you believe? In the ancient African understanding, words were not sounds. Words were forces. The Igbo concept of Okwu, speech as a living thing. The Mande Griots of West Africa, allegedly trained for decades not just to remember history, but to carry it as a living energy in their voice. It is said that a Griot's curse could wither a king, and a Griot's blessing could raise a fallen warrior. According to oral tradition, the ancestors understood that sound vibration was not separate from reality. It was the instrument through which reality was shaped. And that is where the truth begins to fade. Because when colonial forces arrived, The Griots were the first ones silenced. The first ones called liars. The first ones told that their words carried no power. Was that coincidence? Or strategy? Here is where many would disagree. And that disagreement is exactly what they counted on. Across dozens of African traditions, Vodun, Candomblé, Akan, Ndebele, Zulu, the ancestors are not dead. They are differently alive. Allegedly, certain lineages maintain the ability to petition their ancestors in ways that produced real, measurable outcomes. Healing where medicine had failed. Rain where drought had settled. Clarity where confusion had consumed the community. Some believe this was not religion. It was relationship. A maintained connection between the living and those who came before. A communication channel built through ritual, memory, and sacrifice. Was this sacred truth or controlled belief? Did the elders protect tradition, or were they themselves protected by something beyond tradition? They tried to explain it away. They called it adrenaline. They called it superstition giving confidence. But according to oral traditions across West and Central Africa, certain warriors underwent initiation rites that allegedly granted them something beyond physical preparation. A state in which pain registered differently. In which fear dissolved into a focused, consuming calm. Among the Dahomey Amazons, the legendary female warriors of the kingdom of Dahomey, it is said that their ritual preparation was as much spiritual as physical. And that their enemies spoke of them not as fierce women, but as something that could not be adequately explained. Were these women simply trained to excellence, or were they tapping into an ancestral power that warrior science has not yet mapped? This is not mysticism. Or rather, it is not only mysticism. Africa gave the world its first recorded surgical procedures. The world's first botanical pharmacies. The world's first documented psychiatric healing practices. But beyond the physical, certain traditions speak of healers who operated at a level beneath the body. The Sangoma of the Nguni people describes a healing that addresses the spiritual wound beneath the physical symptom. The Babalawos of Yoruba tradition speak of divination systems, allegedly of extraordinary diagnostic precision. Some believe these practitioners were not separate from the science of their time. They were the science of their time. And they were told to be ashamed of it. If this knowledge had not been suppressed, where would African medicine stand today? Perhaps the most dangerous power of all. Not a weapon. Not a sight. Not a word. But a memory. The ancient African oral tradition was not a backup system for those who couldn't write. It was a technology. A living archive. The Griots, the elders, the keepers of sacred knowledge, allegedly trained for decades to hold entire cosmologies, genealogies, histories. Without a single line of text. They say certain Griots could recite lineages going back 30 generations with the precision of a legal document. Could recall the exact words spoken at a treaty 200 years before. And the reason this power was the most dangerous. Because if you cannot erase the memory, you cannot rewrite the history. They tried to erase it. They tried to replace it, but something remained. If 7 powers this profound were nearly lost, how many more were fully erased? What knowledge walked into graves with the elders who were never allowed to teach? What was silenced before it could be passed down? And here is the question that should stay with you long after this video ends. If your ancestors possessed wisdom powerful enough to be systematically suppressed across centuries, what does that say about who you are? What does that say about what still lives in you? What if the truth was never meant to disappear? What if it was only waiting for you to come back for it? Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 7 powers do you believe was real? Which one do you feel closest to, in your own life, your own intuition, your own history? And this one matters most. Do you believe this knowledge can still be recovered, or has too much been lost? Drop your answer below. Let's not let this be another conversation that dies in silence. They called your ancestors primitive. They built museums to display their sacred objects as curiosities. They wrote textbooks that began Africa's story with chains. But the ancestors knew something the colonizers feared more than any army. They knew that a people who remember who they are cannot be permanently conquered. The 7 powers revealed in this video were not lost. They were not forgotten. They were buried beneath centuries of shame, beneath the weight of a history written by those who needed you to forget. But burial is not the same as death. Seeds are buried, and seeds rise. Not lost, just buried. Not forgotten, just waiting. If this video uncovered something in you, something you didn't expect to feel, then you are exactly who this channel was built for. Ancient African history exists for one reason: to bring back what was buried. Not as performance, not as content, but as truth. Subscribe. Not because an algorithm asked you to, but because your ancestor stories deserve to live somewhere they will not be silenced again. New stories, ancient truths. Every week, we will not stop uncovering.